Hello, Rob here from the Flanagan Homestead. I'm standing in the greenhouse. It's an exciting day. I've got several packages today in the mail, seeds for the class to start growing. These aren't our vegetable seeds. We'll be doing those a little bit later. These are seeds for our flowers, for our hanging baskets. So it's always exciting to get your seeds in the mail, and we'll be working on that soon. But speaking of seeds, I wanted to come and talk about some common mistakes that people do. And how do I know they're common mistakes? Because some of these I've done multiple times. I just need to resist the urge of doing this, and I know better, but I do them anyways. So we're excited about our garden and getting things going. So these are some of the things that we do. And the number one single most made mistake, I believe, is trying to plant your seeds too early outside. If you enjoy your garden, if you enjoy the activity of gardening, or you just enjoy the food, here in Washington State, it just rains and rains and rains. It's a long winter. And then in the spring, maybe sometime in April, we get a couple sunny days in a row and like, oh, bright light, let's go plant some seeds, and I know that it's common knowledge that you're supposed to, there's last expected frost date and you need to plant after that. I'm not even talking about timing it for the last expected frost date. I'm talking about planting your garden so that it can thrive instead of just putter along. So what I'm talking about is quite often, you get that bright light and a few nice days and so we go plant our seeds out in the garden, and whether it's beans, peas, lettuce, whatever, we plant that out in the garden, and yes, it's warm enough to germinate and they start growing, but here in this area, in one of these northern climates, it sprouts and it's just barely inching up, and it's not thriving. And it will grow if nothing else happens to it, but because it's growing so slowly, it's susceptible to other things. For instance, we have tons of slugs around here, and if that plant takes forever just to get to 2 inches, a slug comes through and the whole plant's gone. So don't plant too early. So even though you're past the last frost date in this area, you're not going to get enough hours of sunlight, and you're not going to get enough intense sunlight. Our UV index is going to be at 2 or 3 on a lot of these days, and that's not a 5 or a 6 where it's going to really push the plant along. So don't plant too early. Wait a little bit longer and let it go. Or when you get those first sunny days, plant them inside the greenhouse if you have one, or on your windowsill, and get those lettuce starts or even your beans or peas up for a few inches, and then take it outside another 3 weeks later or whatever it is, and put it in the ground, and then that's a little bit more sunlight, a little bit hotter days, and then they'll thrive, and they're big enough that something as simple as a slug or a snail is not going to wipe it out. Okay, so wait, be patient, wait, and you'll be happy that you did. Another thing that goes along with don't plant too early is know how many days to harvest, and that's important on some plants. So for instance, in our horticulture class, we grew some pumpkins this last year, and we got anxious and excited again. So, but you want your pumpkins in October, right? Because Halloween's coming up. So just I have it written down here. Our snowball pumpkin, we didn't plant it this year, but that's a popular one around here, takes 100 days to harvest. A fireball pumpkin, 110 days, and your giant pumpkin can take about 150 days. So if you want October pumpkins, you need to do the math and backtrack that, and not necessarily plant all your pumpkins at the same time. So again, we got ahead of ourselves this last year. The kids loved all the pumpkins we had in our garden, but we had September pumpkins instead of October pumpkins. Fortunately, they lasted and made it through there, but we were ripening up in September because we got ahead of the time. So no days to harvest and when you want to actually have it. And very similar to not planting too early is if you decide to start things in the greenhouse like we do here, don't be too anxious to take them outside, or basically don't forget to harden them off. Okay, I usually don't have too much problem in taking my plants off without hardening them off too much, but there are some plants that have really struggled. So if you've had a plant in the greenhouse, and if you have a way of putting your little seedlings on a cart or something and wheeling them outside, in the morning for a few hours and bringing them back in, and then the next day doing a little bit longer, and not having them have to go overnight. But just give it a little bit of time of being outside the elements with hot, with cold, with wind, and hardening them off. That's great if you can do that. So don't move them outside too early, and don't forget to harden them off, and that's a great benefit to the plants. Okay, number 2 seed planting mistake that I am guilty of is trying to plant too much of a good thing. If you're planting more than you can use, you're just wasting garden space and wasting seed. So, for instance, I love snow peas, green beans, lettuce. Those are some of the favorite things out of my garden. So it's not wrong for me to plant a ton of those, but instead of having a long row and planting it all at once, which was my tendency for a long time, I'm finally getting smarter, plant a section of it, the amount that you can eat, and wait a couple weeks, and then plant another section of it, and wait a couple weeks, and plant a section. So as those beans or peas or lettuce are getting ripe, then you can pick them, and then you got more coming on, and more coming on later, and more coming on later. So don't plant too much of a thing in general, but then also you could spread out the planting. Now, if there are foods that you can preserve easily, like my peas and beans, and my berries, I have tons of berries, you can pick those and just throw them in the freezer if you want. Other people can them or whatnot, but for me it's just easier to freeze them, and then, so you can save them. But some things are not easy to save, like the lettuce. You're going to end up losing that. And I did this with my Shiro plums. I love Shiro plums. They're just amazing, but they're hard to preserve. And so I have multiple trees now, and then I get thousands of plums all at one time, and it's sad when a lot of them end up rotting because I wasn't able to pick them all and use them all. So don't plant too much of a good thing. I know you have your favorites, but either stagger them or control the amount that you actually plant. Okay, so that was just a real short list, but those are common things to do, and I just wanted to encourage you to not do that. And as always, make sure your seeds stay moist, but don't drown them. Okay, so as they get started, and you'll have a lot of success, and enjoy your gardening. And as always, thanks for joining me on the Flanagan Homestead, where Christmas trees are my business, teaching including horticulture is my job, and outdoor projects are my passion. Be blessed, everyone. Happy gardening.